You know what? This is an interesting collective because you don't really see this that often in the business, and this is less a company, blown deadline, than it is kind of a collective. So I'd like to start with David, Nina. I want you to talk about like how this was all put together and your vision for it.
It's the put together part is really your business.
I wish I could say we had a plan. Seeing all this work, maybe it seems like we did. I think we just, David and I are kind of different, but there's some things that we have in common. We care a lot about honesty. We care about details, and we like working with good, talented people, and being able to see people thrive in their careers and go forward. And so I guess I don't know that we had a plan, but I'm tremendously proud of what we've done.
We didn't have a plan. No, I mean, we approached every project singularly as, okay, this is what we have to shoot now. And I think it was somebody at this festival basically was the one who looked up and said, you know, it's been 20 years. And that
Exactly.
gives you just that moment of pause of like, okay, we were doing one at a time, and they were all what we were doing now. But I'm particularly proud that, I say this often as a joke, but I say it with a little bit of pride. This is 20 years without an audience. Because like nobody watches the shows when they're on the air, they find them later. And they go, oh.
You know, Carrie's hit right there, right? You know?
Well, Carrie will have to admit it. I mean, and God bless Carrie. Carrie has been...
we worked on Show Me a Hero for 18 years, and 5 people watched it.
Right. And I wouldn't trade those 18 years for, 3 normal ones. But I mean, on some level, God bless you for being part of the green light, because I'm glad we did the work we did, but it was always done with the premise of like, this is the story we're trying to capture, and no plan. If anyone had a plan to be a TV entity, Blown Deadline certainly would be the argument against whatever plan you thought you were executing.
Well, obviously, and you came from journalism and got into it. I'm guessing that's why Blown Deadline is the title. But here we are 20 years later, and you've created kind of like a little mini studio. You work with the same people, you trust the same people. So again, I want to just stick with you two for this. So what is it about like working with the same people through the years and knowing you can rely on them?
I mean, Nina should tell this story, but I met Anthony as one of the 2 ADs on The Corner, the first project we did, and I don't know, he was like 9 years old. I mean, no, he was older than that. But I mean, he has now reached a point where like, you say we work with the same people, we can't get Anthony Hemingway anymore. We can't lasso him into the next project. He's gone, man. But that was Nina. You knew him even earlier, right?
Yeah. How many? 25 years.
Yeah.
I think we just realized that. It's been a long time now. Anthony was an office PA, but he was always too big for the office. he was busting at the seams, and followed me around until I got him a job on the set. And I was a second AD at the time, and we've just kind of been together on all kinds of projects since then. Yeah. And The Corner, was that your first job as a first AD?
Yep. All my first came from this family. My first job as a first AD, my first job as a director, my first job as a producer. That's indicative and should tell you the loyalty and the love that comes from this team and what they see in you and believe in you and trust in you and really get behind you, that to motivate you at the same time is beyond encouraging. I know how hard it is to talk about yourselves, but the fact that they believe and they trust and they grow from within is something that's not common in this business. And all of us are a product of that and can say that very easily, because it's something to work with someone where you actually are a part of the project and they trust in you and allow you to have a voice in the process, because you're there for a reason and a purpose. and they know that, and they believe in you, and that's just, again, it's not common. And it set the bar for me. It's
So
like
you had to go out there in the real world.
well, yeah, it's like, and at the same time, with that, and as hard as it is for you to even want to grow someone and clip their wings and let them fly and continue to persevere what you've helped cultivate is a testament to what you've shared and what you've started. And Nina and I have been together, like she said, since I was 16 years old. And it was just an instant thing where it's like my big sister here, it was like we're a kindred spirit and everything else, and it's just always been that.
But David and I have had the advantage, I think, of making up our own rules. That he had the experience of being on Homicide, Life on the Street, and I had come from features mostly. And so when we started doing these projects, The Corner was the first big, thing where David was a showrunner on his own. And I came in as a producer originally, and Bob Colesbury was our other partner. And so we kind of figured out how we wanted to do it. We don't have a traditional writer's room. We don't, when we did The Wire, we were just doing one episode after the other, and I thought after the first season, I was like, you know what, we really need to take a day in between each episode so that we can have a scout and have everyone sort of catch up. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. So that's what we do, and the directors that even come in now are thrilled about that, just to have that one down day. So there's just things that we've developed over time about how we want to work that we just had that autonomy, and so I don't really know that it's unusual.
It's
how we
not
do
the same.
things, because I haven't had to be out there, and I haven't had to be away from HBO too much in the past, in all these years, which also, keeps me kind of in a bubble, I guess.
Well, Anthony, that's a perfect segue. You've got so much stuff on your resume that post Blown Deadline, post these productions. So you've had all kinds of experiences across the board. What's the difference between working with these guys in this group?
I think I'd say probably the first thing that is the biggest difference is really working with a family that cares about you, that has the right sensitivity to allow you to be a part of it, not just being hired for, in a mechanical sense, and just to only just do one thing. They entrust you, they depend on you, and at the same time encourage you and push you. One of the testaments that I've taken, and it's something that I know Nina and I learned this from her, which was, a lot of times I'm working on productions where it's just saturated with crew, and there's so many people, and on one hand that's great, but then on the other hand it's like, well, what am I going to do? It takes away from your contribution in a sense, and so you just don't have a lot of people just sitting around. Now sometimes that's helpful because things that we've done has been incredibly challenging, but at the same time it's how you learn, it's how you grow in love with what you do, because you have great stakes involved. You are a part of it from start to finish in a large way, So that is really, I think, for me, the biggest thing that is the difference is really being with someone who really wants and respects that you are contributing to the total process.
And just quickly on that, do you find the bar is different as far as what these two expect, and then you go to a different production?
Man, yes, absolutely. Like I said, I cut my teeth on David's material. Right. It doesn't compare to much out here, honestly, and that is just not saying I'm biased to it, only because he and Nina both are two individuals that care about what they do, and of course the common thread through a lot of it is really talking about something that is about the human condition and about life and people, and so there's such a great passion that comes into that material that doesn't come all the time. So much is done and driven by just commerce. Yeah. And so that's been the hard thing that I've found in going and dealing with so many other projects after the last thing we did together. It's just the foundation that I have is come and been rooted with them and of that same mind and belief. So it's been really challenging. And my first directing, my debut was on The Wire. So everything after that was just like, oh my God, it just didn't compare. So it's been hard.
Yeah, it's not often that you start on the show that's
No.
going to go Hall of Fame first ballot.
Yeah, not at all.
And Alexa, is it true you've cast every single Blown Deadline?
I didn't do the corner, so everything since The Wire.
That's a lot. So I want to circle back because 20 years of that. But like, so we have, we got Dominique and Chris are both here, and they've been in, both of them have been in multiple productions from Blown Deadline. What is it that you're looking for that these guys want in actors, and how it matches up to sort of maybe David's material and some of the other writers, and specifically these two, because the roles that they've been in are so diverse from one another.
Well, I mean, I think it's always about the writing and how you realize it in the most authentic way possible. So that's about really good actors. And in these cases, them being able, my job is to understand how much an actor can do. And in this case, they can do more than the thing they were hired for the first time. And everybody, the great thing about working very, very hard to make something great in an authentic way that nobody sees for a really long time is that's part of the bond, is everyone cares so much about the work, and it's not about the audience. I mean, it's great when there is an audience, eventually, it's really nice, but we didn't have one for a long, long time. So it really, you just come to understand that it's about the work and doing it the best way that you possibly can. And that's also about, really wonderful actors who work hard and serve the material in the best possible way.
Yeah, and all of the shows that everybody just saw clips of, I think one of the through lines of those is that a lot of times there either is a name actor or sometimes it isn't when you first start. But what people find is that they fall in love with a lot of because the cast is such a huge ensemble cast, and they start falling in love with actors that they might not have had the headlining role. How do you find people like that are going to pop out?
I don't think you ever think about it that way. You really do just think about peopling it with interesting and diverse, different kinds of qualities and behaviors. I never think about the end result, except to serve the piece and make sure that it'll be clear. I think you do fall in love with these characters, and it's because I think really fine actors bring writing to life in a way that, no offense, David, isn't even on the page. It comes out in a wholly dimensional way. But I don't think any of us ever know how it's going to work until it's there.
Well, I think people here, because they're TV geeks and are all totally into it, a little bit inside baseball stuff about casting, putting you on the spot a little bit, but can you give me a little bit about Dominic and Chris, about what you saw in them for their roles? And
Shit.
Sorry, guys. It's going to be good. Come on.
Well, I think we worked a lot in the room, didn't we? You and I, for Show Me a Hero?
I don't think we worked a lot in the room for Show Me a Hero, but I would tell the story because I came in for Show Me a Hero and I made a choice, and Alexa said that was weird, but we're gonna keep it. Yeah, and I was like, no, I could do it over. She's like, no, yeah, we're gonna keep it. Thank you. And she took the mic, and I was like, well, I walked out I just blew that.
I mean, sometimes it's always tied to the writing, but sometimes what you see is somebody has a take, or, in Chris's case, it's that he absolutely allows his characters to just be. He doesn't show off. He doesn't work too hard.
Lays.
In Dom's case, casting that piece was really difficult because people so want to show you their version of those characters in that circumstance. And again, it's really about allowing them. And I know that sounds amorphous, but you guys know what I mean. And also, we have to be able to see a certain, eventually, I know, because I know the way we were thinking about what the arc of this character would be, that we had to have some hope eventually. So somebody's spirit has to come through a bit. But, again, it's really just about good acting. I know that sounds boring.
No, that's not. And Carrie, I promise I'm not just skipping over you to get that. But I want to ask Dominic and Chris, how quickly into each of the productions that you've been on did you realize that David's not going to put up with you riffing and freelancing?
That was the first thing he said to me.
Paul Haggis directed Show Me a Hero, and I'm a writer as well, so I do poetry and theater, so it really is about the words and not changing anything. So I wasn't trying to change nothing. And then Paul Haggis was like, okay, now you could just play. And I was like, what? You could say what comes. I was like, so I couldn't do it because I was so like, and I was like, well, they don't need my help to do it. Because what I really loved about when I got the sides for Show Me a Hero, I said, oh, I know that girl. She's like me, she's like my mom, she's like the girls in my neighborhood, because I'm from East New York, Brooklyn. I just felt it was authentic. And sometimes when you get scripts of people trying to write for these characters, I'm like, I would never say ain't, like you wouldn't put ain't there. Like, there's a way of using slang. Okay, there's a wrong way to use slang, and there's a good way to use slang, and I think David just
I can
nails
take
it.
that a step further. When I'm in the audition room, I read the scenes over and over and over again. And if you ever try and come off of the way it's written exactly, it doesn't work rhythmically, and it's not as good. And those are, it makes absolutely no sense to try. Actors know when it's easy to say, and it's easy to say when it's written well, rhythmically. It just comes out.
That's right. And there's no need, in my own experience with them, and I can really only echo what Anthony said, that there's such a tremendous and singular to blown deadline level of trust and belief that they kind of put in us, which then in turn makes you reciprocate that trust and belief in them. And so when those pages come in, I love to ad-lib, and I've done a lot of it in other jobs. There's no need to do it in this. In fact, most of the time, it's kind of a cool dichotomy to working with them, because both times that I've gotten to work with them, it's been the biggest and best quality job that I've ever had, and both times it's been the easiest job I've ever had, because I can essentially just show up and say the words, and everybody gives me all the credit.
I have actually a little bit of inside casting baseball from the writer's perspective, which is you're often reading actors at that point on early drafts of the scripts.
Right.
So there often is a lumpy phrase or something that probably won't survive. We even hear it on the tapes. We'll be watching tapes of actors reading, and we'll realize, yeah, that line's got to die. But then, from a casting perspective, it becomes really interesting, because you watch the actors who can actually make a bad line work in an audition. That's like, wow, they actually did something with that turkey. At that moment, you're going like, nah, I'll fix the line later, but look what they're doing, It's like there's actually a tell to a good actor saving a bad line.
Right.
And Carrie, so you've heard them say that no one's watching. I think it's an overstatement, and well, certainly in 2018, nobody's watching anything because the audience is so spread out. It's really just, in a really interesting way, it goes back to sort of The Wire at the beginning, where, I just from a critical standpoint, we were all like, this is going to be one of the greatest series of all time, and no one was watching it, we were saying, but they were. But our feeling was at some point people will discover it, and that has happened, and that's probably true now for lots of dramas, given just how the peak TV content. As far as HBO, how does that play? Is it just quality, or you just want to be in business with blown deadline? What's the story?
Well, my first encounter with David and Nina, but David first, was when he came in to pitch The Corner. And the internal conversation at HBO about The Corner was, nobody's ever done this before, and we were, and to a large degree still are, in the business of doing stuff that's going to pop off the entertainment page and that's going to get opinion makers talking. Yes, we also now have to produce big blockbuster shows like Game of Thrones, The Sopranos, but a key part of what distinguishes HBO as a kind of magazine of programming is having those projects that are going to get people talking off the entertainment pages about issues. And what David and Nina and the team really know how to do is two things. Number one, they have their fingers on the pulse of subject matters that go to the very heart of the fabric of American society. And number two, particularly David, has an incredible sense of what's going to stir shit in the journalistic community and in the kind of among chattering classes, as they call them. And so, on each of the projects that I've been involved in, and on the projects that I'm not involved in, I know that instinct has pretty much proved unerring in serving one of the needs of HBO as a subscription service.
Yeah, and just a quick story from HBO's perspective, and I didn't hear it from you, but first season of Wire is so super complicated at the time. People watch it now and they're like, wait a minute, there's 40 people in the first hour, nobody's identified. No one. When you switch buildings today, I always tell people that like a regular TV show says a car is driving, it'll say, you'll hear the typing, and it'll say FBI headquarters. None of that was in the first episode of The Wire. It was only on the glass door, and you had to really have to pay attention to David Simon stuff. And I remember that first season of The Wire being so complicated and so dense and so great, and then talking to an HBO executive who won't be named, who said, what the hell are you doing in the second season? You're going to take the whole show and you're going to turn it around in the Baltimore docks. Tell me about what that was like. Well, I guess, Carrie, inside HBO, and David, what was your feedback when you basically told them, yeah, all that stuff that we built, we're going to change it and make that the B storyline?
I got nothing because I didn't work on this show.
Tell me.
Yeah, Carrie's with us on the miniseries. We knew that we wanted to slice off different pieces of the city and start structuring a city, one sort of social, economic, political sector at a time. And so the second season was, we're coming in, we now want to do a theme on the death of work and the working class, and so we'd like to go to the port. And I remember what we had sold them was a critique of the drug war for the first season. And so when I came into Chris, and it was Carolyn and Chris was at that meeting, and I remember I said, so now we're going to do this, we're going to put that story on the shelf, and we're going to go over here, and a whole new class of people, and we're going to chase down that theme. And Chris turned to Carolyn and said, was that the plan? And Carolyn, she had my back, but how can you have my back when I basically she goes, it is now. And I mean, I think it's fair to say in those days, there was a little more, let's throw shit against the wall and see if it sticks to HBO. I mean, the stakes were not that high we were in a lovely sinecure in Baltimore because the subscription base was really being driven in a healthy way by The Sopranos, which had premiered a season earlier, and Sex and the City. And we were in, the only, you aside, because you showed up on the corner, but the joke used to be the only way that an HBO executive would ever get to Baltimore to look in on us was if they were on the way to Paris from LA, and the plane had to make an emergency landing on North Avenue, So we were really left alone, and it was an incredible.
Okay. So let's talk about. No, let's talk about the corner and because I did spend time on the set on the corner, and I happened to be there.
You did get out of the van, yes.
And I happened to be there on a day when there was a bit of a crisis, and there was a New York Times. Well, from HBO's point of view, there was a bit of a crisis. A New York Times reporter named Janie Scott was doing a piece for the Times as part of a series of articles about race in the workplace in America. And there was a lot of tension between David and the director of the corner, Charles Dutton. And Charles was giving me an earful in his office and was about to sit down for an interview with Janie Scott. And, you know, all the way through the process of Janie reporting on the show, HBO was very skeptical that this was a good idea. And David overruled everyone and said, yeah, I want this to happen. I want this to go forward. I called Mission Control and I said, you know, Century City, we've got a problem. And then the instructions I got was do what you can and we'll see where the chips fall. And I remember the day that the article came out. It was on page 1 of the New York Times. It was the front page, started above the fold of the New York Times, and I got a call from my father, who's on the East Coast. I was in LA at this point, and he said, hey, Carrie, your name's on the front page of the New York Times in an article about race in the workplace in America. And I thought for sure my career was over. I'd love to hear David's point of view on
How great was that article, though, from the point of view of like publicity for an HBO project?
This is my point, but that's why I'm turning it over to you.
I mean, it won that series of articles, by the way, for the Times won a Pulitzer Prize. Not we were just one of like 9, but I'm just saying. Obviously, being an ex-reporter, I have some regard for that process of acquisition. And my premise was, we're not doing anything we're ashamed of. We're telling a story. We're going to tell it really well. It's going to be accurate to the book. It is fraught racially at points. We have it. But she actually came in. Janie came in. She originally said she wanted to do something about the writing process with myself and David Mills, a friend of many years who we were working with. We've worked with. He was in this family too. He's regrettably passed on. But he and I wrote those scripts together. But we worked on our college paper together, and though he was African American, the relationship had moved way past that. You know, we knew letting her in that she wasn't gonna, but she gravitated to the relationship between Charles and myself because Charles was very stressed. He was working with material from a white writer. Charles lived that dynamic in East Baltimore. He came up at Huffman and Holbrook in that neighborhood. He'd been in prison famously. He'd sort of honed himself as an actor, beginning in prison productions, and he came to it with a lot of history. And while he was venting to you, and while I could tell that there were things that were frustrating to him with me, I also could tell every day in the dailies that we were getting good stuff. Really good stuff. So, like, my job at that point is okay, you're not going to be my best friend for a while, because, by the way, we ended the project on very good terms. But in the making of it, he was intensely aware of the racial dynamic. And I thought, if he vents that, it'll be for him to do it. And meanwhile, my demeanor with Janie Scott in the New York Times was, and this happened today, and that happened today, and unless you bring it up, I'm not bringing it up. In the last week of production, she finally gave me all of the, and I remember I said to her, I said it like with sort of smiling at her, I said, oh, has Rock been indiscreet? And she looked at me, she went, well, I said, it's okay, tell me what he said. And then I was in a perfect position to just say, okay, well, I could see how this would upset him, but what I meant was, and on the other hand, and I knew right where it was going. Again, the calculation of letting her in is now she's in the inside, but just don't lie and don't, it's the best possible circumstance. So I remember I landed the quote that ended the article, which was, I said, I know this. What I've written is better because he directed it, and what he's, and vice versa. And that ended that was the culminating moment. So it's like we actually benefited from the risk of letting her in. If she'd have been a reporter who was intent on tearing us down. But you got the sense from the New York Times and from that whole project that it wasn't going to be that. So then all we had to do was take a few, moments of stress and, take a year off of your life, and we were fine. But like, I knew that was going to turn out okay in the end. But again, I've had a lot of years in newsrooms, and she went about the process the right way.
Well, I have we're gonna have some audience questions in a minute, but I did want to talk to the actors and Anthony about acting and directing for Blown Deadline, and these guys, David and Nina, about expectations, but also the differences in your roles. I can barely see you down there, but the roles that you've worked on these shows are incredibly different, and I know as an actor you have to shift, and that's part of the job, but how much benefit is it knowing that these guys are it's not like softball stuff, you're tackling really deep issues, how much trust is there, and then working with Anthony, and Anthony, you can add this too as a director, what is it like knowing that these guys, the projects that they take on are socially and politically conscious rather than just fluff?
Sure, I'll go first. It's, again, sort of singular to working with them, that like the stakes are higher, the pressure's amplified because the topics are important and topical a lot of time. And for myself, at least, I can only speak to my experience, but I always feel like amplified pressure is beneficial if you embrace it. If I allow that to scare me, to make me feel like this must be done right, I must deliver, then oftentimes like that's what has to happen. Also, they physically punish you should you not deliver. So, and then as far as Anthony directing, a lot of the times, again, just in my experience, you alleviate some of that pressure. You turn Michael Jackson on in between takes and shake that ass, and it makes me, it's like, and that always helped me, especially on Treme, where I was the young gun, and that was my first big job, and to be perfectly honest, I was scared shitless a lot of the time, and wanted to bring it and make sure that I delivered to them. I've never worked with another director who did that, who like knew to kind of put us at ease, make it fun, remind us that like, dude, we're all dream walkers right now. We're all doing what we all dreamt of doing, and that's rare. And so, smile, that was my experience.
I haven't gotten a chance to work with Anthony yet, but hopefully it'll be soon. But I will say, like, Show Me a Hero was also my first big thing. It was my first thing that I auditioned for when I got with an agent. So already I know I've heard of The Wire, and I was like, I really want this. So I came in, like, just really desperately wanting to work with them. And then we were doing ADR for Show Me a Hero, and David came and said, I don't know, have you heard of my new show? And I was like, no. And he was like, it's called The Deuce, and I have a role with you in mind, but it's not a role you take just to take it. So you should read the scripts, and if you don't want to do it, it's no harm, no foul, right? And to me, that was like the best thing he could have said, because of course I want to continue working with them. And so to have the opportunity to say, well, this role is a little bit too risky for me, I don't think I want to do it, didn't mean that it was going to be the end of our relationship. But luckily I did Show Me a Hero with them, and I felt very protected by Nina and David. And so to go on to a project like The Deuce, I already was like, yeah, let's do it. And I already felt so protected and honored to, be a part of it. And then again, like in Show Me a Hero, I played a 18-year-old girl from the projects that, had all the attitude. And so for them to say, we see your work in this show, and we think that you would be great in this show, is a completely different character. I've never considered myself like sexy. I always played teen kids, so
Come on.
This opportunity. Thank you, Chris. But to get the opportunity to just, have somebody who leads with that and who understands that power was just really exciting for me, and I'm thankful.
I'll say this on Dominique. When she was working on Show Me a Hero, she had a composition book, like she had written the entire backstory of everything she had conceptualized about her character. Some of which was from her conjecture, but all of it was in the pocket of plausibility. But Nina found that out, right? And you came to.
But we were cross-boarding. You have to understand, we had 6 episodes that we mashed all together. So I think on day 1 we were actually shooting things from episode 6 and probably episode 3 and 2 at the same time. So Dominique, it just blew us away. I think her preparation, being such a young actor and trying to wrap her head around all of that. How was the span of what, like 5 years, 6 years in the story?
Yeah.
So she had to, at one moment, be this person who had been through, breakups and pregnancies and just this whole journey of this character, and then modulate herself back to, the start of the story. So her way of doing that was through music and through journaling and just lots of things that she took incredible responsibility for the part and for being ready for whatever.
Nina came to me and said, "We got a live one here."
But Nina also made it acceptable. I love to write, and I didn't have an opportunity to share it with other producers and directors. They don't care, So just the relationship that we built together, she was open to hearing it, so I was able to share and say, "Oh, I wrote this," or whatever, or even having an idea about a hair for Darlene in another episode and being like, I don't know if I can, am I overstepping? But just feeling comfortable enough to email Nina and have my ideas be included.
Me? Oh, I think as you've heard so much already, like, they give so much, but at the same time, they expect the same, and that's the great part of working in any of these productions with them, is just that ability to really feel like you've contributed to the total piece, and you just wasn't just brought on or hired to just do one little segment, it's like really being a part of it, and that's just such a great feeling, and that's the great thing. The stakes are high, and you don't want to let them down. That's the thing, you don't want to fail, and it's like everyone has their contribution or your lane, and you better like bring it and uphold your end of the the cornerstone of what we do.
I was at Anthony had a panel on bottle episodes earlier today, and somebody was saying, that you really should watch the credits, because there's people that every single person, every single job is something that contributed to that episode. And I think on our shows, that's more true than otherwise, that, if somebody comes into work not prepared, it's not just us, if anyone comes to work unprepared, it affects everybody, so we say that everyone we hire is given a long leash in terms of making decisions and being autonomous, and really everybody gives input, but they also have to be able to back up those decisions, if David asks you, like, well, why'd you do that, you better have a good answer.
And because the material that we do is important, it's serious and beyond challenging. It's that, again, the importance that, like what Chris was saying, I want to make sure that, we don't forget about who we are, what we're doing. It's just breaking that monotony to realize that we're also here. We're not doing surgery or creating anything crazy. We're telling great stories, but we still have to be human. And I think that's the great thing. And it starts from the top. Even though David may be in a brain and thinking about story, and when you come across him, you may think like, oh, wow, what's wrong with him? But you realize that, he's thinking.
You have no idea.
He's thinking, same with Nina, same with me, but it's like the importance of trying to also remember that balance of just making sure that net is there to provide the safety for especially the actors that are having to come and deliver this material, to still feel safe and protected, because they're taking a leap. We all are, because we're telling something honestly, and it requires you to give yourself, your whole self. And that just requires that, I know when it comes to my contribution, that I need to make sure that in helping kind of govern the set, and that part of it is, I want to make sure that we're all there and we're doing this together. They're just not alone.
I think that's a good ATX session for next year. What's wrong with David Simon? What's going on in that head?
We'll need more time.
We need more time. It's a 2-hour session next time. I got a couple of audience questions, but and this, David or Nina, you could take this. It says, you've shown amazing ability to address important and significant issues. What are the next big things and issues you're itching to address?
We have a pilot order for a continuing series that was going to be about Capitol Hill. In the earlier panel, if anyone was in it, I basically said what happened to that was we wrote it, we imagined a world in which a normative, sane, experienced politician from either the center left or center right would occupy the White House, and Congress would continue to be over-moneyed and paralyzed. You know, status quo since Gingrich, depending, you know, I mean, it's basically been back and forth in the White House with a intensely partisan Congress. So we wrote that. Trump. So we threw that out. We rewrote it based on Trump being the farcical, inept creature that he was in the early weeks, but then the tax bill being rammed through, showing that the fact that he is such a strange, almost, you know, he's a floor show, but he's also a cipher politically. Congress now could suddenly effect incredible change. Second script thrown out. So we're working to try to deliver that. I think it's really important to address this moment when the Republic itself and all of our democratic norms and all of our systemic checks and balances, when they're tottering. I mean, I don't think, if you do what we do, which is address politics, there has to be a way to address this, but to go right at it, it's a moving target. As fast as you think you've surrounded what is possible, you know, it falls over into some new insanity. You know, I mean, what can you write that can, you know, circumnavigate porn stars and Russian, you know, bots targeting voters in Wisconsin counties? It's like, as soon as you think you've got a head for this, it's like, no, we'll really show you something. Stay tuned. So that's on the agenda, is how we deliver that a political piece now for this moment, and it's going to be a struggle.
So another huge hit then, basically.
Yeah, that's not the one where we find the audience. If housing policy in Yonkers didn't get them, I don't know what.
Yeah. I loved Show Me a Hero. I thought that was great. This question from the audience is light, and I think a possibly nice closer. Did Ziggy survive prison?
He went to Iraq.
He went to Iraq. He was in the lead Humvee of Bravo Company.
And this is a bigger picture one. Anybody can take this, Carrie, if you want to grab this too. It's how do you think HBO content has impacted primetime television and the way we watch television?
Truth, you know, it really raised the bar for what is truthful television. I think that's why we, you know, stick with David and Nina and their team. It's that's from the beginning with The Corner. That was, you know, it knocked over a wall that seemed to have existed, that we're, you know, and I mean, if you look at Generation Kill, which we didn't talk about much this afternoon, the number of Marines that come back to me that I encounter that continue to say that defines the Marine experience is astonishing. You know, and when David and I started talking about him doing that, there was an effort to, you know, do the All Quiet on the Western Front for the 21st century, and it's reflective of David's larger, you know, pursuit of truth in an otherwise, you know, kind of very much fantasy-oriented medium.
Yeah, and it's we have to wrap up here, but I do want to add that if no one has seen or if you haven't seen Generation Kill, it's a fantastic piece of work. It's so immersive, and as a critic, I was cursing David because just like The Wire, he drops you into it, and you can't. Everybody's got masks on. You don't know who any of the characters are. Everybody had helmets on. I was like, who's who here? But it's like I think it's indicative of not only David and Nina and this whole organization. They don't pander to the audience. I think that's why you're here tonight, to see this. 20 years of this greatness is unbelievably hard to pull off. It's quite an accomplishment. So a round of applause for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.